Good afternoon, class. Right now, we're going to go ahead and take a good long look at the chapter 6 homework. And just to kind of let you know, right, we're getting into imperfect active indicative verbs and imperfect middle passive indicative verbs in this chapter, as well as looking a little bit at irregular nouns. So there's 3 total paradigms in the chapter. The only ones that you need to memorize for the quiz would be the 2 imperfect verbal paradigms. Your irregular noun is just something to be aware of. It's not something that you necessarily need to memorize. There's a lot of really good information in the chapter. The section about how vowels contract is really worth your time to study and to master and to get down, because it will help you identify that a word has an augment on it. There will be corner cases, there'll be interesting situations that come up with how words are formed in Greek. And so understanding how those vowels relate to each other will help you tremendously. You'll find that you need to know that in order to track down the lexical form and to identify an imperfect. Imperfects are sometimes a little harder to identify in the wild, so to speak, compared to an aorist for past tense, because the aorist is a little more distinct, as we'll see in a few weeks. So it's worth your time to really get the augment down. So you'll see in the homework, we have our classic section of just memorize the active and middle passive paradigms of luo in the imperfect, and then write them out 10 times from memory. I strongly encourage you to do this assignment. It has printed. It'll really help you out. Let's talk parsing then. In this case, we've got 10 verbs for us to parse here. And let's take a look at our first one, etherapeuanta. Etherapeuanta. Well, right away, we have a word we recognize, right? Therapeu, right? We know the root of this is therapeuo. We can see that stem is present here. And then what else do we see? We see over here, we've got our augment, right? We know this is a classic epsilon augment. So we know based on this chapter, we're looking at an imperfect. And so now we have to ask, is this a present? Or not present, rather, is this an imperfect active indicative, or is it an imperfect middle passive? Well, remember our paradigm, amen, u, ata, ometha, estha, anta. We have our third person plural. So what do we have? We have a imperfect middle passive indicative, third person plural from therapeuo. They are being healed, I suppose you could say, or they were being healed. I would be actually correct. No, they are being healed. They were being healed. Even your teacher gets tripped up sometimes. Our second one, eblepon. Eblepon, well, we see blep, right? We know this is coming from blepo. And so we know that's our word. We have our augment. We have our ending here. So what are we looking at? We're looking at a imperfect active indicative, first person singular, and it could also be third person plural. So remember, it's on sn, amen, eta, on, right? We know that is our paradigm for the imperfect active indicative. So we know it could be either one. I was seeing, they were seeing. Ecrinometha. We know this is coming from crino, right? We see crino. We also know crinomai, like from apocrinomai. The two words are related, but crino. We see that stem here. We see that this ametha ending is here. We have our augment, so we know we're looking at an imperfect. So we have an imperfect. And then what do we got? We've got a passive ending here, first person plural passive ending. So we've got ecrinometha. So we have an imperfect, middle passive indicative, first person plural. We were being condemned, right? We were condemning, we ourselves were condemning, something like that, or judging, or what have you. Eparuamein. Well, we've got the paru, we've got our paruamai stem here, we've got our augment, and we've got our middle ending, middle passive ending. But we know that a paruamai is middle only, right? That's why we memorized it as paruamai, not paruo. So what are we looking at here? We're looking at an imperfect middle indicative, first person singular. Amen. We have that ending there. We've got agesta. So what word do we have here? Well, this is going to be a good one for us to look at. Well, notice we have this eta at the beginning, right? We've got this very clear middle passive second person plural ending. And so we know our stem is here, don't we? Otherwise, just gamma couldn't really be a stem, right? So what are we thinking? Well, we've got an augment here that's lengthened. You've got the epsilon that has combined with an alpha to produce an eta. And so we know this word is actually ago. It's ago. So you have an imperfect, middle passive, indicative, third or second person plural. Agesta. Yep. And it could be you were being led, y'all were leading for yourself, that sort of thing. Looking at 6, we've got erku, erku. We can already hear the erk, right? That kind of sounds familiar, right? And we know we've got an ending we recognize. Amen, u, ata, ometa esta anta. Right? We know we have what looks like to be the stem from erkomai, and we would expect to see lengthening there, that epsilon lengthening to an eta. Notice how alpha and epsilon will both lengthen to the same eta with the augment instead of taking the additional vowel, right? So we know we're looking at then an imperfect middle, and we know it's erkomai, right? Just like paruomai, we memorized this as a middle because we know it's middle only. And so we've got an imperfect middle indicative second person singular. You were coming. 7. Aginata. Aginata. What do we see here? Well, we see something we recognize right away. We see an augment. We see a middle passive ending, don't we? Amen u ata, right? We have this ending here. And then we see a root that we recognize, right? Gin. What has that gamma iota noon root? Ginomai does. Ginomai does. So what we have here then is an imperfect middle passive indicative third person singular from ginomai. It was becoming, or it could be it was happening, that sort of thing. It could even be a textbook here actually even has arriving as an option. Ginomai kind of has a broad semantic range, so keep that in mind. There's a lot of potential for a correct answer here, even if you don't exactly have what the textbook says. Now I have epistuita. Epistuita. Well, one of the words we recognize right away, pistuo, right? We have that. We have our augment. We have a second person plural active ending here. So we can say this is an imperfect active indicative, second person plural. You were believing, or you believed, right? Or you did believe something. Probably you were believing, y'all were believing would probably be the best way to bring out that imperfective aspect. Isn't it nice, by the way, that the imperfect tense actually has the aspect that bears the same name? That's just nice, isn't it? All right, now in 9, we've got akuen. All right, well, what do we see here? We see this ku with an ah class vowel. Maybe we're thinking akuo, and if you thought that, you'd be right. We've got here what it clears to be a lengthening of the vowel due to the contraction. So we've got akuo. We know we have a imperfect form, right? On sn, and eta on is our paradigm for the active. And so we have the third person singular ending here. So we have an imperfect active indicative, third person singular from akuo. And it'd be he was listening or he was hearing. Now we have 10, achis, or achis, right? Now, this one's interesting. Remember, the textbook specifically brings out this one as an example because it has that different historic root that used to have a sigma in it, right? I think he called it intervocalic sigma or something along those lines, I think is what he called it. And it's a very, very fancy way of saying that used to be there. And it shows up in some of the forms later on. But we see here, because of the situation here, the sigma is rejected. And now we have this kind of vowel situation here. We have this circumflex. We've got our breathing mark. We've got our diphthong here. And so this is an unusual one, but that is actually evidence of the augment. And so we've got a imperfect active indicative second person singular, right? On sn, amineta on. And so be you were having. That would be the correct translation. It's going from echo, right? Remember, echo is one of those special words that has that intervocalic sigma. All right, so now we're done with that. Let's talk translations. Jesus autos uk baptizen. Jesus himself was not baptizing. That's the translation there. It's pretty straightforward. Sometimes the pronoun here, we'll learn about this more in the future. These pronouns can be emphatic. And so Jesus, he was not baptizing. So more proper English would be Jesus himself. Baptizen, right? We have an imperfect active indicative third person singular from baptizo. We see that baptides root there. We see all the evidence, right, that we've gone through with the parsing. And since we had so much parsing, earlier in this, I'm not going to pay as much of attention to the parsing of these sentences this time around. Just throwing that out there. Now, this is kind of a curveball situation here. So we have a present active indicative participle, and it's a nominative masculine singular from Lego. It's a bit early, I think, in your Greek career to be dealing with participles here, but we have our main verb. We have kradzo, right? We see that krad stem. We have on, sn, and eta on, right? Actually, it's not masculine nominative singular. It's masculine nominative plural. My apologies. That is a plural ending there. My brain was like, this is a plural. Why are you saying that? This is a plural participle, and it's actually a third declension nominative ending there on that participle, but that is not for you to worry about at the present time. But in case anybody was wondering, what is that? That is a present active indicative nominative masculine plural participle from Lego. You say the ones saying or saying. Here we have an imperfect active indicative third person plural from Kradzo, imperfect active indicative third person plural from Kradzo. And in this particular context, right, it could be, as far as you know, right, this word could be first person singular, it could be third person plural. And the evidence is here with Legontes that we know that it's plural. You guys can't possibly know that at this stage in the game, but I'm just going to tell you that's why that is, so that nobody's like, that's unfair. If you translated this and you said, I cried out saying that you are the Son of God, so you translated it that way, you can go ahead and mark that correct, because you're not supposed to know about about this participle yet. So that's this could be either one. So Dr. Blummer really laying it on thick there. And so they cried out saying, notice how the participle's modifying the verb there, kind of like in English, actually. That would be the same. Let's talk about the rest of the sentence. They cried out saying that. Now, hati, I was talking with somebody earlier in the class about this. Hati can mean because or that. That's kind of the way we gloss and translate over. But in situations like this, you translated that, they were saying that. And really what hati is doing is introducing content. Hati clauses can introduce content. That's often like, you believed that, you were told that, he was saying that. And then this will be the way of kind of introducing the content of what those verbs we're talking about. So they cried out saying that. Sue, this is you, and just capital because it's beginning a sentence. You, remember, Amy, A-S-T, Esmen, Este, Icene, right? Amy, A. So we have a present active second person, or perhaps present indicative, present active indicative second person singular, Amy. I guess technically speaking, it's not active, it's just present indicative, but I digress. You, so they cried out saying that you, so remember, we're trying to figure out who's the subject of this sentence here, right? So you are, there's our verb, hahuias, there's our nominative, the Son of God. So how do you know what the subject is here, right, of this particular verb, a? And the answer is, of course, there's kind of a hierarchy, right? Proper nouns go first, so somebody's name. Pronouns, kind of second priority. And then nominatives with the article would be the third priority. And then it kind of gets more difficult from there. In this particular case, we have got you, a pronoun. So we could say, they cried out saying that, like the Son of God, you are. You could say that, or you could say that you are the Son of God. They both mean the same thing, but in this case, I think we can safely conclude this is the subject of the sentence because it's a pronoun, and in both cases, it comes out to the same thing: the Son of God, you are the Son of God, right? That's more logical. So we know it's our subject. All right, question 3: Anthropos, Akin, Techna, Dua, 2. Notice how dual, right? See that root there, dua. That's a classic word that we actually still have some vestiges of in English. Anthropos, a man, right? No article, no ha anthropos, a man was having 2 children. A man was having 2 children. We have here echo, right? We've got an imperfect active indicative, third person singular from echo. Remember, we have that unusual augment here because of this word's historic morphology. And it's a good thing Dr. Plummer talks about this, because you'll see this word, you'll see echo a ton in the Greek New Testament. And oftentimes the weirdest words with the weirdest morphology are the ones that get used the most. And that's actually why they have the weird morphology. They get used a lot. And so strange trends and behaviors modify the pronunciation and spelling of the word. 4. Kai edidasken kai elegen autois. And he was teaching and saying to them. And he was teaching and he was saying to them. Okay, what do we have? We have a didasko, right? We have that root, didask. We have an augment. We've got the en ending, so we know we're looking at an imperfect active indicative, third person singular from didasko. He was teaching. And there's no express subject, so it could be he, she, or it was teaching, but of course it's Mark's gospel. And who does all the teaching in Mark's gospel? Jesus, right? So we know it's him. We know he's the subject. And he was teaching and he was saying to them. So we know this is our word lego. There's our leg root there. We've got an augment. We've got that same ending here, that en ending at third person singular. So we're dealing with another imperfect active indicative, third person singular. And then we've got autois, right? We see that masculine plural dative ending there. Autois, to them, we know that's the pronoun. And there'll be a whole chapter on pronouns and adjectives and things later, but you're getting exposed to that now, and that's helpful. 5. Paloi, hupegon ton judaion kai epistuon eis ton Jezun. It's a bit longer. Paloi, many. Just like to point out too, notice how paloi has that nominative masculine plural ending there. Paloi. That is what it looks like, right? It looks like that, and that is what it is. So many were what? Well, we've got a verb here, and what do we have? We have an interesting situation, don't we? The one thing a textbook didn't talk to you about was, or maybe it did, but it didn't mention upsilon here. And you might be thinking to yourself, okay, I know this is a chapter on imperfects. I know this is from John's gospel, and it's historic, right? And I see I have another imperfect here, right? We've got pistuo, right? We've got epistuon. They were believing in Jesus, right? Many was our subject. We know that because it's our only nominative here. And so we've got an imperfect active indicative, third person plural here. And so that kind of makes us wonder, well, what's this? What's hupagon, right? We see we have the same ending, a same on ending, but it doesn't look like we have any kind of augment. And that's because hupago, which is the root of this word, is a compound word. It's got a preposition on the front of it, and that is hupa. Hupa, it's an epsilon, or upsilon, sorry, upsilon pi omicron. And of course, just hoop is all that remains of that when it's applied to ago. And that means then that actually we do have an augment. This is ago, and we have ago, right? So we have that lengthening. Remember, we saw up here, we have agestha, right? Agestha, and we have that lengthening there. And so when you deal with a compound word, compound verb, like this one, you'll actually get the beginning of the verbal stem will be where the augment goes, and it'll be inserted between that and the preposition that's kind of smushed on top of it. So that's where you look for that. So in this case, we have an imperfect active indicative, third person plural from hupago. We have hupagon. And many of the Jews, or from the Jews, many were going from the Jews and believing in Jesus. You could say many of the Jews, many from the Jews. There's different ways you could render that. Going away of the Jews, they were going away from the Jews, and they were believing in Jesus, right? So there's kind of some flexibility here. I'd say away is probably right, given what this word means, hupago, right? Going away. And then you have what you would expect the genitive would be used in that particular situation. It's called a partitive genitive. Partitive partitive would be correct. And they are believing eis ton Jezun. Remember, now we've got our preposition, and eis is always paired with accusatives. We have our accusative case here, ton Jezun. So many, there's our subject. Many were going away from the Jews and believing in Jesus. Now we have 6, hade Jesus eparueta sun autois. Okay, so we got a couple things here. De, remember, is post positive. That's the term here, post positive. That means it's always going to come second in a clause when it shows up. So it kind of stands between the article and Jesus, but the article is in fact modifying Jesus, just where this word just goes where it goes. And you could say and or but. Jesus eparuata. We'll see paru, right? We know paruamai. We've got an augment. We've got a third person singular middle passive ending. We know paruamai only occurs in the middle. So we've got a imperfect middle indicative third person singular, and Jesus was going. Soon just means with. Autois them, and soon is paired with a dative case. So sometimes prepositions can control, actually not sometimes, many times, prepositions can control the case of a noun. So if it follows a certain preposition, it'll always be in a certain case. There's some prepositions that can take multiple cases, but there are some that govern the case of it. And then the ones that can take multiple cases, some take only two, some take all three. Obviously, the ones that only take two in the case would only occur that way. So in case you're wondering what's up with that, just wanted to give you that explanation. So ha de Jesus eperuata sun autois, and Jesus was going with them. 7. Egraphen ace tengain. Egraphen ace tengain. Now this one's interesting, right? Egraphen. Well, what do we have here with 7? Right? Well, we know we have our word grapho, right? We see graph there. We know that ending is not there. We also see our augment, and we've got on sn, amen, eta on. So on sn, there's our third person singular ending. We have an imperfect active indicative, third person singular. He was riding on Tengain, the earth or the ground. Earth can also mean gay, gay can be ground. And we know this is from John 8. This is the story of the woman caught in adultery. He was riding on the ground. Question 8. Kai lambanon pneuma hagion. Elambanon pneuma hagion. See, I don't always get everything right the first time with pronunciation. And I'm tired today, folks. If it sounds like I'm a little mumbly, that would be why. We have 8. Elambanon pneuma hagion. Okay, so what are we dealing with here? So the first thing we notice, we see lamban, right, from lambano. We know, and that's a nice big stem, isn't it? Easier to spot than some. And then we've got our augment, we've got our on ending, and this is really interesting, right? We don't have a lot of information about our subject in this sentence, right? There's no express subject. We know on, sn, and eta on, right? We know this could be first person singular. It could also be third person plural. So we have an imperfect active indicative, first person singular or third person plural from lambano, I take or receive. We have a subject here, pneuma, which is in the accusative, right? We know this just because it's been given. And we know this is modifying pneuma, hagion pneuma, Holy Spirit. Easy enough to spot. And what does it say? It could say, I was receiving the Holy Spirit. And it could also say, and they were receiving the Holy Spirit. Knowing the context in Acts, it's plural. But it's certainly plausible that it could be both. Kai ebaptizanta in to Jordane. Okay, what do we have here? The first thing I want to point out, we've got our verb, right? We see it's baptizo. We see that root there, baptiz. We got our augment. We've got our middle third person plural ending here, middle passive. And this is one of our first real passives that we're actually seeing here. So Kai, and they were being baptized in the Jordan, to Jordano. That's the Jordan River. They were being baptized. So again, imperfect, passive, indicative, third person plural from baptizo, and they were being baptized in the Jordan. You could say they were baptizing themselves, but that's extremely rare to see a reflexive like this, especially, you go into Matthew chapter 3 and, John the Baptist is baptizing people. So, all right. 10. Ude gar hoiadelphoi autou epistuon ace auton. Ude, not even. And we know gar means for. We've seen that before, right? So for, remember, it's always good to kind of front this, right? Because it's post positive like de. So it just always appears there in the second element in the clause, second constituent there. So for, not even, hoiadelphoi autou. his brothers, right? We have a masculine nominative plural. For not even his brothers in him, right? Remember, ace takes the accusative, believing in. And then we have our word here, pistuo, right? And we've seen this before, right? We know a few things. We've got an augment. We've got the on ending here. So we have an imperfect active indicative, third person plural. We know morphologically this could be a first person singular, but we have a subject, don't we? We have this hoi adelphoi, autou, his brothers. For not even his brothers were believing in him. For not even his brothers were believing in him. Right? It's from John 7. Jesus' brothers kind of thought he was crazy at the time. 11, uk akes exousion. Remember akes, we've seen a few times already. We've parsed this. We know it's an imperfect active indicative, second person singular from echo. We know we have an uk negating it here. You do not have authority, or you are not having authority. That's how you would translate that. If it was just akes exousion, you are having authority, you have authority, however you want to say it, or you were not having. Oh my goodness. See, this is what happens when I don't drink enough coffee. You were not having authority. You were not having, past tense. If you were like yelling at the screen when I messed that up earlier, then you should now feel vindicated. You were not having authority. And if it was just akes exousion, it'd be you were having authority. But of course, we know uk negates it. Remember, a good rule of thumb is to bring this in last, to translate it without the particle first and then bring the particle in later. 12, ha'achlas, erketa, pros, auton, kai edidasken, autus. Okay, what do we got here? Well, first we know we have a verb here, erketa, right? We have, you feel the erk, right? We've got what looks like a lengthened epsilon here to an eta. And we would probably thinking to ourselves, this is erkomai, and you'd be right. And what is it? It's an imperfect middle indicative, third person singular. We know they're always in the middle, right? That's why I memorized erkomai. Auton, pros just means two. Auton and kai edidasken autus. Well, we've seen didasko earlier, haven't we? He was teaching, right? We've got our augment. We've got our on sn omnid on ending here. We've got our third person singular ending. We've got didasko as our root. So we have an imperfect active indicative, third person singular, right? And so both of our imperfects are that way: imperfect middle indicative, third person singular; imperfect active indicative, third person singular. And the crowd. So aklos means it's nominative masculine singular, and the crowd, or the crowd, was coming to him and he was teaching them. The crowd was coming to him and he was teaching them. Okay, now we've got our sentences here of English to Greek. And I'm just going to briefly look at these, right? We know that we're in for a passive construction here. We were taught the law, and we know we're going to be dealing with, since we have our past tense were, we know we're dealing with an imperfect. We know didaskos are words for teaching. So we've got edidaskamatha ton namon. We know the word namos is law, and we know it's definite and accusative. We were taught the law. And it's worth pointing out, that a passive verb, right, can, like, obviously it affects the subject, but it can also take an accusative complement, which is what we're doing here. We were taught the law, or in this case, you could say it's taking it as an object. The crowd was crying out to the prophet. Well, we know our word for crowd, ha'aklos. We know it's going to be ekradzon is going to be our verb, right? Or ekradzen, I should say, not zon. My mind went to the plural because crowd, but crowd's actually singular in Greek. So ha'aklos, ekradzen. And you could say probably to prophete. That's what your textbook has here too, to prophete. So pretty straightforward. Again, we know it's past tense. We know it's going to be dative to the prophet. We know it's going to be definite. We know it's going to be a singular verb because of the crowd. You get a lot of textual variance with kind of items like this because there's kind of like a logical plural, even though grammatically it's not plural. I don't know the day or the hour, right? So we know we're going to have a negative construction. And so when you're writing this one out, I think don't worry about the don't. Just get that out of here for a minute and translate I know the day and the hour, and then think about, and then you're just going to put your negative particle in front of your verb. That's what you're negating, right? The word for knowing will be what you negate. So just don't get tripped up on this part. Try to translate the rest of this first, and then make the determination as to what negative you'll be bringing in, because of course that is going to be determined by what follows it, whether it be or ook, right? It depends on what what letter follows it immediately. So yeah, just make sure you do that. So now with 3, we've got correct answer, gnosko, right? I don't know so notice how we don't have any indication of a past time or a present active indicative verb. We know that. No passive, right? No multiple subjects. So we know it's going to be present active indicative. Gnosko, the day. Hemera is our word here. So we know it's feminine. It's going to be tain hemeron. And we know aura, or hora, actually, is our word, and it has that alpha ending. So tain horan. So ugnosko, tain hemeron, kai, tain horan, because we know we have that conjunction. 4, the disciple of the Lord was being healed. So we know our subject's going to be ha mathetes, right? 2, kuriu, of the Lord, right? And then we know we're going to be dealing with a past tense verb here. So it's going to be imperfect. And we have that imperfective aspect here, being, right? And healed, what's our word for healed? Well, therapeuo, right? Therapeuo. Etherapeuetai. Etherapeuetai. Or pueta, sorry. Etherapeueta, because it's an imperfect. See? It's getting me. Etherapeueta. So we've got ha mathetes, tu kuriu, etherapeueta. There you go. Yep, because it contains all that information. Now our last one, the angel of glory raises the child. We know our subject's going to be ha angelos, and it's going to be tes doxos. It's going to be our modifier here. And then we know our object's going to be, ta technon, rather. Techna would be plural, but ta technon would be singular. The angel of glory, so ha angelos, tes doxes. We know it's going to be ta technon. So what's our word here? Well, raises. This is going to be present active indicative, isn't it? It's going to be third person singular because the angel is acting on the child here. It raises the child. So we have ha angelos, tes doxes. And what is it going to be? It's agere, ta technon, agere. Alrighty, that's our homework review. Bit of a longer video, but I hope this was helpful.